When I get older, losing my hair, so many years from now, will you still be sending me a Valentine?
Good afternoon and welcome to Berkshire Senior TV. This afternoon we're going to be talking about community legal aid with Michael Morelli from Community Legal Aid and what it can do, what it does in Berkshire County, and what it can do for you, especially for elders that live in Berkshire County. So Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Let's start with Community Legal Aid. Sounds like a big place. Let's talk a little bit about the organization and just help us understand how it fits in the human service array in Berkshire County.
Sure. So Community Legal Aid, for people, just as a way of background, was formerly Western Mass Legal Services for probably about 40 years. And in that time, it was in Berkshire County, as is Community Legal Aid now. And so in 2011, we merged with another legal assistance organization in Central Mass and became Community Legal Aid. So now we're in 5 counties. So we're in Worcester, Franklin, Hampshire, Hampden, and Berkshire.
Same organization, same umbrella organization overall.
That's right. Same umbrella organization overall, and same services that we provided as Western Mass Legal. Nothing's changed there. So we are, in Berkshire, the only legal assistance organization that provides free legal assistance to low-income, disabled, and elders.
And let's talk a little bit about that. Eligibility first. So
sure.
Low-income, disabled, and elders. But are there income requirements? What are the, who can walk into your office and say, I need your assistance?
Right, so there are income eligibility, there's an income eligibility threshold for people who are under 60 years old. And you know, I could tell you it's 125% to 200% of the federal poverty line. Means nothing to anybody,
right,
but
yes.
You know, certainly people who have a legal issue should call, and certainly we can determine, right, where they fall and if they're eligible. But if they're you know, under 200% or between 125 and 200, or obviously anywhere under 200, we can provide legal assistance. Now, when they're 60 or over, you know, under law, we are supposed to provide services. So there's no income, you know, eligibility determination. Doesn't irrespective.
If they're over 60.
If they're 60 or over, it doesn't matter what their income is. We would look at their case, and of course, if their case had merit, we would assist them.
But you don't just you're not a general practice. I mean, you're not a general practice like a law firm, or you know, there are certain areas that you specialize or that you are focused on, or
right. I mean, so we are sort of like a law firm, but we pick. You know, we're grant funded, so there are certain things that we assist people with based on the grants that we have, and we get a certain amount of money from a state funding agency called MLAC and a federal funding agency, LSC. So, but we get a lot of grant money, and I can tell you just sort of basically what we deal with. It's civil legal issues. So we don't handle criminal cases at all. That's for the CPCS, right? We don't want to duplicate services.
If you're over the age of 60 and you've robbed a bank, do not run into your office for defense.
Do not. We're not going to be able to help you.
Okay.
Not with that anyway.
Okay.
So all civil legal issues. So that's housing, where people, especially where people have an eviction and have a subsidy, right? So they're either getting Section 8 or public housing, and now their subsidy's at risk. They're at risk of losing it. But even if there isn't a subsidy, if they're within our income eligibility guidelines, or they're an elder and they've received a notice of eviction, they should contact us. We handle family law issues, and that stems from, you know, just regular divorces, but restraining orders, custody issues where the parent with custody is at risk of losing it, you know, based on you know, something that the non-custodial parent has brought to court. And really, I think our efforts there are around victims, traditionally victims of domestic violence. So that's sort of that's the priority when dealing with family law issues.
So you're not an elder-only agency. You serve elders, but you serve everyone, from cradle to grave as well in
That's
other
right.
circumstances.
And certainly, and obviously, unfortunately, if an elder was the victim of domestic violence, that's something we would look at as it relates to them trying to get a divorce or custody or whatever. Probably not going to be a custody issue for an elder at that point. But where it comes down to divorce and where, a lot of times people have to split property and figure all that out, we would look at that. We would take that case on.
Now, you've talked about custody, that I know, but there is a more common, or it's becoming more common, grandparents caring for grandchildren
That's right.
because of whatever might be happening with the family kind of in between, getting custody or guardianship. Is that the kind of thing that you guys ever get involved in?
Yeah, that's something we would look at. I mean, I don't handle it myself, but certainly, and especially I think in Berkshire County now, right, where you're seeing grandparents more and more are taking care of grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and this issue of guardianship and custody comes up. That's something that certainly if they're having an issue, protecting that custody, or even if they are looking to obtain custody, they should contact us.
What if it's, and this might just be kind of a general advice, but in that kind of circumstance with grandparents, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, what if it's just kind of an informal, grandparents stepping in, trying to do the right thing? Should they probably talk to someone if it looks like it's going to be a permanent or even semi-permanent, relationship, that this isn't just a temporary thing?
Right. I think certainly if they're stepping in and they realize it's not a temporary thing, it's worthwhile to contact us. Right, we could do a variety of things, right? We could give advice. We may not take a case on, and there are a variety of reasons why we don't take a case on, but I think at least it's worth contacting us because we may give advice. We may, if it's not something we handle, we could refer out. So. Yeah, I think in situations where, especially in situations where people are not sure about what their actual legal rights are, and especially I think in those situations, they should certainly contact us.
And what about, go back a little bit to, you mentioned tenancy and landlord-tenant disputes, that type of thing. If someone is an elder living in public housing, a housing authority building somewhere,
Right.
So then you would be in a position to represent them against the housing authority, or if they got called, or I know there's hearing. I mean, the eviction process, as I know is very long and there's many steps. But is that a process that you?
Typically that's not a process I would handle. I don't handle the housing issues, but I think typically what would happen is if somebody, let's say there's an elder who lives at Berkshire Town and they received a notice from the housing authority that says you're going to be evicted in 30 days. They receive what they call a notice to quit.
Right.
At that point, they should contact our organization. And really, what we could do will really depend on what is happening in their case, right? If it's an issue where the landlord alleges that there is a lease violation, then we would take a look at that and see, well, what are the lease? Do they have a lease, right? Is this a lease violation? Can they work with the housing authority and maintain their housing? It's more than just, certainly we would, where we thought we could make a difference, represent on that and, ultimately go to court and try to defend against an eviction. But there is also a certain amount of, talking with the housing authority, trying to figure out, is there a way to remedy this? I don't think that's ever out of the question, but that is the process, basically. I mean, if it were where an elder or non-elder owes money, right? They're behind on the rent and they receive a notice to quit because because they owe rent, then that's certainly something we would look at too. I think the real takeaway is if you have a subsidy, if you have a Section 8 or you have something through the housing authority like a public housing, you should really contact us if you have an eviction, because of course it's hard to tell what we would do. I can give you many theoreticals, but I think the important thing is for someone to contact us, and then we certainly would review their case. I would say where someone doesn't have a subsidy, where there's no Section 8 in place, it's just private market rent, we typically don't look at cases until they get a summons from the court. So there's the notice to quit that the landlord is required under the law to issue, and then after the tenancy terminates, right, where the notice to quit runs out, or if it's 14-day or 30-day, then the landlord has to file a case in court. And once the tenant receives that court document, they can contact us. I'd also add that there are times when people contact us post-judgment, right? You're evicted. And I think if there's some, if they need help in some way, if there's, I know there are times when we've looked at those cases and tried to make a difference. So I don't ever want to I don't want people to just think, well, I didn't get the note, and now I'm too far beyond.
Right.
I mean, maybe there's not a lot we can do, but I think it's worth someone certainly getting in touch. Maybe there's something that can happen.
Now, what about cases, and we certainly see this a lot with folks we work with in our money management program and others, someone who has gotten overextended, maybe has a credit card company or a debt collection company, someone coming after them it's kind of beyond their scope to address. Is that something, can you help them get judgment proof, or what, do you play any role in kind of those kinds of, credit card bills, things like that?
Right. We are, I think, starting to look at, and I think maybe we have for a while now, helping people in situations where they actually are judgment proof. You don't necessarily have to become judgment proof. I think if you're receiving SSI as an example, you're judgment proof.
Right.
But what happens sometimes is people still get a judgment against them, right? They go into court and a judge who doesn't understand that particular part of the law will just say, well, now you're going to pay this every month. Or they enter into an agreement. Maybe they didn't go to court. And those are things that certainly we look at and advise on for sure. I think we're looking more and more, certainly in Berkshire County, I think there's a wider and wider demographic of seniors for sure, right, who I think are getting, whether they're being targeted or not, they're certainly in situations where they owe money, they have debt, and if they're receiving SSI or Social Security benefits, they are judgment proof. And so people don't always tell them that, and people don't pay attention to that.
And people don't always recognize it for themselves. Like, oh,
that's right.
What does that,
That's right.
So maybe explain a little bit, what does judgment proof mean?
Judgment proof basically means that even though you may owe the money, there is you are not obligated you may be obligated to pay that money back, but there's no harm that will come to you if you don't. You are, it shouldn't, it may or may not affect your credit, but you shouldn't be harassed by a debt collector. You shouldn't be brought into court. You don't have to pay the money because you are exempt really from paying that under the law. Doesn't mean that you don't necessarily owe the money, and it
or
doesn't
that you
mean
should run up your credit card,
right?
Yeah.
Or that if you can make a payment and it's something you can afford, then certainly if you're paying down on something, I think that's important to do. But for people, especially our clients, your clients, people are really financially in dire straits at times, and I think it's, if they know that they may not have to worry about this and that they can't, be brought into court or harangued, or it's one less thing. I think, that is an issue we look at, and I think one where we would certainly give advice on. I can talk a little more about what we, certainly the rest of what we do and what I do. So we also offer immigration services, basically humanitarian-based immigration assistance where people are getting VAWAs. A VAWA petition is where somebody was, where somebody is a victim of domestic violence, and through their, through their working with either through a U.S. citizen spouse or through a family member, now they're not going to be eligible because they've been abused by that person and weren't able to get their eligibility for citizenship and can get it under VAWA. It's not restricted. VAWA is not just restricted to immigration or immigrants or people who are non-citizens, but it's certainly a way in which people can get a status while they're here. So we handle those, and we handle U visas, which I absolutely know nothing about, so I will keep that to a minimum. And we also handle, certainly Social Security disability denials. I don't handle that specifically, but we do have advocates who handle denials for, and we see more, I think, of non-elders being denied, right? That's more of a Social Security Administration saying, nope, you're not disabled enough yet. So for me, what I do, I handle primarily all of the public benefits issues for the Pittsfield office, and that includes all of the benefits through the Department of Transitional Assistance, so DTA,
SNAP,
right, SNAP, there are a lot of acronyms, and they all pretty much say temporary. You know, they all give this idea of a temporary life for the benefit. Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, that's SNAP, which was formerly food stamps. TAFDC, Transitional Assistance for Families with Dependent Children, that's commonly known as welfare. And there is another cash assistance program through DTA entitled EADC, Emergency Assistance for Elders, Dependents, and Children. It's a very small state disability benefit that people are eligible, people could be eligible for. So I handle those cases that come to our office where people are denied, where their benefits are being terminated, where their benefits are being reduced. All of a sudden I have this, people may have, they're getting a certain amount of money. All of a sudden DTA says we have an overpayment, you owe us money now. So I address those issues, and our organization does, on all levels of advocacy. So starting with trying to determine what's going on, maybe working with DTA all the way up to a hearing, representation at a hearing if need be. And so that's DTA. I also handle unemployment insurance appeals where someone separated from the job, let's say they're fired, and then they apply for unemployment insurance, and the Department of Unemployment Assistance denies them. So there's an initial period, people apply, they get denied, then they have the right to appeal and go to a hearing and be heard at a hearing. So we represent people at hearings. And I should say for all of these, for DTA, for unemployment insurance, for Mass Health, I handle Mass Health, we handle administrative hearings and beyond, post hearings. We may have a case where someone went to a hearing by themselves, they didn't even get in touch with us first, right? And then they go, oh my God, what do I do? Sure. We would take a look at that, and we might be able to help post-hearing, which could mean going to court, asking the agency to reconsider their decision. So kind of all over. I'm thinking about Mass Health, and that's just a behemoth. I could be here all day. We could just do a show, John,
I know.
on Mass Health and Medicare. That's the other one. I handle Medicare issues now, and it's just.
And when you say you handle Medicare issues, like for us, we come at that with Shine counselors and volunteers and staff. So you're talking about when someone's been denied and feel like it was not done, or it was not a correct denial, or it was not a justifiable denial.
Right.
Then you come in and go back when maybe they've come to us and tried different things, and we're just stuck, and then they might come to you and say, we still think this is not a legitimate denial. Right.
Well, and I think a lot, and we'll get referrals from Elder Services all the time. Yeah, I should say for anything I've talked about today, where there's a legal issue, where someone has been denied or been terminated from a program, or somehow a benefit's been reduced. Yeah, we approach it from a legal standpoint. What is your legal entitlement to this? And so if someone was denied, if they have a Medicare denial, and there are just countless Medicare denials we could talk about. Part D plan doesn't approve a drug because it's not on their formulary, and there are a myriad of Part D plans. Or if someone's denied, or I should say the big one really is a Medicare Part B late enrollment penalty. Someone didn't enroll in Part B when they were supposed to, and now they've enrolled in, and they're being told you have this penalty amount you're always going to pay, which is included with your premium.
Right.
So in those cases we get involved we get involved where we think we can make a difference, because they have a legal right potentially to either have that penalty removed. Maybe they have a right. There was a big case, not brought by us, but an organization in the legal services organization in Boston, where they were able to fight for the right for a Part D coverage for a medication that Medicare had just been saying over and over you're not eligible for. It was an interesting case. So so our perspective is there a legal, we get involved when there's a legal issue, and can we make a difference on that?
So it doesn't doesn't mean every denial, because someone deny, if you're just not eligible, you're just not eligible.
Right.
But if there's something that's not matching up between their eligibility determination and yours, or the individual's, then maybe there might be something there. Well, do they understand the full story or whatever it might be?
Right. I mean, some things. Right. I mean, I think if people are really, I think when in doubt, get in touch with us. If they've got a denial, I mean, we look at things, and from time to time we may say, there's just not, this.
Right.
You're not going to prevail on this. I think where we think we can make a difference, that's when we get involved. And by make a difference, I mean where we see we can make an argument in some respect that they can't make. I think, as an example, with unemployment hearings, those are like 95% fact driven. So, the initial determination by the Department of Unemployment Assistance may not be great because they didn't hear the whole story, and maybe the client or the claimant, the former employee, didn't present well enough. And so now we're hearing this, we're able to elicit that information and help them at a hearing provide the full story, as you say, so that they're eligible. So yeah, we're really looking at how can we make this better. I mean, there has to be a legal issue to begin with.
Okay.
I think if somebody, I handle utility issues too, where there's a shutoff notice, right? Somebody gets a shutoff notice from Berkshire Gas. We would get involved to hopefully present why that shouldn't happen. But if someone, owes money to the gas company, that's really not something we're going to get involved in. I think there are enough agencies where they could certainly bargain with the utility company.
Now, you mentioned earlier, in passing, we'll go back for a second, what, if any, role have you or has Community Legal Resources played in the whole elder protective services area? Is that an area that you guys venture into at all? Is it one that it's kind of, there's a process for that? There's agencies that handle that, so you don't, or? Well,
there's elder protective services,
right?
And I think if I had an elder that, if I had a client who had some sort of abuse happening or going on, I think we would certainly get in touch with them if we hadn't received that referral from them. Where we go next, I think, would really depend on the facts of the case for that. That is something we look at. I haven't personally ever dealt with that issue. I think in the scope of, for instance, domestic violence, we would assist elders in that respect, depending on what was going on, whether it be a restraining order, whether it be getting involved in a case. I think where there's real abuse, we're certainly going to assist in whatever way we can. It may end up being a referral. It may end up being, but yeah, I haven't. I can't speak to it too much personally because I haven't dealt with it. But I think we're certainly always looking for, unfortunately, looking for abuse issues. That's something that we could maybe prevail on.
I know one part of what can be parts of those cases is often the question of, and especially if there's a suspicion of self-neglect, is the issue of guardianship, and whether guardianship is appropriate, and it could be being brought by a family member, has to go to a judge.
Right.
Is that something that you guys ever?
We actually don't give advice to family members on how to get guardianship. We used to tell the person looking for guardianship what to be aware of and what they should know. Their rights about what happens when they're giving up, when they're letting someone become a guardian. We don't handle those as much anymore, but that's our perspective. I mean, that's where we would, that's how we would approach it. We wouldn't, if someone calls us, how do I get guardianship of my mother? We wouldn't assist on that.
But you might call their mother and say,
right? And we might say, or if they reached out and said, well, what does this mean for me if someone gets guardianship? Absolutely.
So in some ways, like us, our client, our consumer, is the elder.
That's right.
Even if there's a family dynamic going on, whatever, sometimes we would have to remind ourselves, our client is the elder.
That's right.
Not whatever might be going on around. This is where we start. It might take us other places, but sometimes we got to remind ourselves to come back to that.
Exactly, and when you're dealing with elder clients, you can almost forget that, right? Because there's a concerned daughter, a concerned son, a spouse. I'm always dealing with another person, but I'm always making sure I'm cognizant of who the client is and making sure that I'm assisting their best effort. You want to make sure and be clear. I always try to be clear with, whoever I'm talking to in the family, that, the client, this is who we're working for.
Well, and I know even with case managers and staff around the office, we have to remind ourselves, this is an adult,
right,
who's competent,
right,
is capable of making their own decisions. So there might, this might be a circumstance which we couldn't really envision ourselves, but at the center of it, we have an adult who's deemed capable of making their own decisions, and therefore they might not be decisions you and I would make,
right,
but they are, and then so we have to start with that.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean a lot of that too is like getting the option, letting people understand their options, and letting them make decisions. You may feel one way or the other, as you say, but it's certainly important to make sure they understand their options, and again, make sure that they understand who the client is in all this. Yeah.
Now, you talked a little bit about how similarities to a private practice. How often do you actually go to court?
Well, I am a paralegal, so and it's different for me than a paralegal in a law firm. I have my own caseload. I don't really work for any attorneys. Once in a great while, if I have a case that goes beyond the administrative level, I would still be working on that case, and an attorney would take over to be able to bring it to court because they're licensed. But as an
attorney from your agency?
Yes, an attorney from our agency. But as an agency, we go to court. I mean, I don't have a raw number for you, but we go to court fairly regularly. I mean, I think just like a law firm, we look at what is the merit of this case.
Right.
And you get to that point, and you try to determine what is it. How can we change? How can we make a difference? And how is this client placed? Where are they financially? And how will it? What's the impact on their life?
Okay, we're going to run out of time in just a minute, but I want to let you one more time say who you are, where you're from, and how people can get a hold of you.
So my name is Michael Morelli, and I'm from Community Legal Aid. We're in 5 counties. People can go online at www.communitylegal.org and file an application online for legal assistance. They can also stop into our office at 152 North Street in Pittsfield. There is a number. I may be able in this time to give you that number, which I have forgotten, not off the top of my head. Let's see. They can also call, they could actually call our local number, 413-499-1950.
Okay. Well, I appreciate Michael taking the time today, and I hope this was informative to you as well as to our listeners. And we'll see you next month on Elder Services, Berkshire Senior TV. Sorry.
Would you lock the door? Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64?